Well, hello, and it's wonderful to be here in France with you all to talk about your amazing report, and it follows a series of reports that have been put out by Smoke Free Sweden. So New Zealand has been inspired by what Sweden has done, and I was involved in trying to educate the policy makers and the politicians about the success story and the proof that Sweden provides of the effectiveness of a harm reduction approach. So initially lobbying for an acceptance of snus, but we weren't successful at convincing people in New Zealand. And one reason they said was because snus was culturally specific. But when vaping was entered the market and consumers and adults who smoked found these products on their own without any, official or government encouragement, and we began to see our smoking rates really dive, and so New Zealand now provides another successful case story of how a harm reduction approach, allowing adults who smoke access as easy as it is to access cigarettes, an alternative, a risk-reduced alternative. So really, it has been absolutely astounding working in tobacco control for 30 years and then to see something work so rapidly. So our smoking rates dropped in 2013 or 20, so just over a decade. We went from like 16% smoking prevalence across the country, 15 years and above, down to 6.8%. This really is outstanding in tobacco control. Nothing had reduced smoking that fast. So the government legislated vaping in 2020, and unfortunately, they were going to regulate the oral nicotine pouches at the same time, but that didn't get through in that first regulation. But the new government in New Zealand has said different strokes for different folks. Vaping isn't working for everybody, and they promise to repeal that ban. So we're hoping by early next year, New Zealand will repeal the ban on oral nicotine pouches. They were on the market and people were using them, as well as, vaping. So there were more options. And what we're seeing around the world is countries choosing one. Not in all places, UK, USA, people have access to a range of products. This report, Power in a Pouch, one of the things that I really was so happy to see was the highlighting of how the oral nicotine pouch has worked for women. In New Zealand, we're lucky that vaping has worked for women as well. And actually, women's smoking rates have come down faster than men's smoking rates. Also, among our Indigenous people, we had in New Zealand, the smoking prevalence has been very similar for males and females. And among Māori, the Indigenous people, Māori women's smoking rates were actually higher than men's. One of the things about women and the global tobacco control movement, globally, men smoke a lot more than women. If you look at just the global prevalence, it's mainly men that smoke. But in some nations, like New Zealand, it was equal, really running at an equal prevalence rate. But all of the attention has been on reducing those with the highest rates of cardiovascular disease and lung cancer, which was men. So early on, I have pushed for women in New Zealand to be also considered, that we need treatments that will work for them, that are attractive to them, and these alternative products, as I said, luckily vaping appealed as equally to men and women in New Zealand. but women's smoking rates have come down, and Māori women's smoking rates have plummeted. So the focus globally, though, it hasn't been that, and women have been overlooked. And so it's really great that in Sweden provides this evidence that women found the oral nicotine pouches attractive and convenient. And I really think that this whole feature of the oral nicotine pouches of being invisible, especially when there's so much information, people didn't like smoking, and the cloud of vaping was still something that people could see, and therefore involved other people, and they didn't like it. Whereas the pouch, nobody needs to see it. It's discreet, and women wanted a discreet option to move to. So I do hope that New Zealand follows Sweden in this respect. So our previous report outlines New Zealand's success stories. We're another success story, another case of proof that harm reduction can work. The other thing about how successful it can be is that we were way behind Sweden in terms of our smoking prevalence. And with vaping and the government support of vaping and encouraging adults who smoke to, if you can't quit any other way, switch to vaping. And it just went, we have just raced up from the outside and nearly caught up with Sweden. So our smoking prevalence is now at 6.8%. So we're right on your tail, Sweden. And we have a goal to be smoke-free, so 5% or below by 2025. That is this year. The stats will come out in December. So we're really hoping that it will work. However, the misinformation about harm reduction, nicotine, and these risk-reduced alternatives, there's plenty of proof that they are risk-reduced, massively risk-reduced. That is putting people off. So we do need a range of options, and I think that a discrete option like the pouch will appeal to many of those people who have been put off by the misinformation. The misinformation that is keeping people smoking. And that's one of the biggest risks now to people who smoke, is this misinformation. So really fantastic report. I hope that it raises the profile of women's smoking rates, especially in the countries where women's smoking has risen to equal that of men, and they need more attention.
So, in the survey, one of the findings was that flavours was vitally important for smokers to enable them to make that switch to pouches because they were just a bit more appealing. So you mentioned that the Maori female smoking rates have come down drastically as well, kind of mirroring in a similar way the Swedish female smoking rates and drop. Do you think flavours played an important role in the vaping kind of space in New Zealand and enabling those women to switch to then reduce the smoking rates? Is there a similarity with Sweden, do you think?
I think for both men and women, flavours, flavoured vaping products has played a very important role. One of the things that people who smoke have said to us in our research is that they want to get away from tobacco. So they want to get away from the taste of it. And I think this is why originally snus didn't appeal to the New Zealand policymakers and politicians, because it was made of tobacco. The pouch, as you have said, Jessica, is very similar to the nicotine replacement products. Unfortunately, they did not work very well. They were not effective at helping very many people stop smoking. But it's also the fact that it's a consumer product, and they can go to the shop. They don't have to go to a doctor or a counsellor to help them. They're making that choice themselves, and that's where the power lies. It lies with the consumer to make the choice, and having a range of flavours it's not everybody likes the same flavor. Not everybody wants mint, which is, you know, one of the restrictions is often you can only have tobacco or menthol, and having the range of flavors enables people to match their taste. That's important. Thank you.